And we also would like to recognize the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenape-Hawking, the traditional homelands of the Lenni Lenape people. And we'd like to take a moment to reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past, present, and future stewards of the land, and the role of all of us to join in their tradition and respect and caring for the land and each other. And now I would like to introduce Jennifer Martin, our intrepid executive director, who has been the ED since March of 2018. Jennifer Martin, who originally hails from Atlanta, Georgia, is also an accomplished artist. Her ceramic work is nationally recognized in numerous exhibitions and publications, and she has held a number of residencies, including Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts. Jennifer Martin also she earned, I didn't edit this, she earned her MFA from Georgia State University and served as faculty there soon after. Since 2005, she has held a number of instructor positions and continues to present workshops and lectures locally and regionally, along with serving as juror for exhibitions and as panelist for cultural conferences. Martin's current professional associations include Art Access, the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, and SICA, and since this was written, lots of executive director groups and other leadership roles in the community. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all for being here today. Appreciate you.
We are going to make it so you can see Jennifer better. I know she's gonna love this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Would you like to answer our standard question, which is how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
Did I?
Good opening. Good.
Did I? Yeah, I don't really know. I've heard that you asked that question, hundreds of times now, and I don't know that I have a really clear answer. I grew up in a household where if you can make things or repurpose something, that then you didn't go out and buy it. So very frugal parents, which I learned a lot from along the way. I had a high school teacher that recognized my abilities to work in clay, which is probably the first time I truly touched clay. He actually entered my piece in an award or in a show, and I didn't know anything about it. And then he told me about it. And then I realized that it received an award. So that made me happy. So that was probably my first, like, oh, look, I can do this. But yeah, I think I thought I would probably teach. My mom's a teacher, educator for years and retired as a teacher. And yeah, just kind of, it's not a straight road, you know, the road is windy and you twist and you turn and opportunities present themselves and you take whatever path feels right at the time and you hope that you make the right decision. So
yeah. Well, it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
I guess talk a little bit about what it meant to you when, it's one thing to get recognition, but what did it mean to you to be able to make pottery? Or what did it feel like when you started to think, oh, I could do this activity for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
I need to do it.
Yeah, it was really more of a need. Like once you get wrapped up in clay, it's almost an addiction in a lot of ways. But it's the one place that I feel like I can work and kind of lose myself in the work. We talk a lot about flow and that sense of flow, but you really, like, once you overcome the technical aspects and you've learned how to use the material, which you're always learning, I feel like, but once you can appreciate and understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then you set out on that journey, you can really lose yourself in the material, which is what I like about it. There's no concept of time or hunger or other things around you, which is, we'll talk a little bit about it today, but which is why sometimes you have to intentionally stop and start your studio practice, because you realize the strength of that pull towards your studio, and you also realize that life has other priorities that need to be met right now, whether that's professionally or personally or whatever. So yeah.
Do you remember, you were talking about like gaining technical proficiency to the point where you could lose yourself? Do you remember that moment or that period of time and when was that?
Yeah, it was definitely an undergrad. So there was a lady she was a graduate student at the time. Her name was Linda Smith, and she kind of taught me how to throw, and she made these really beautiful, tight, functional pots. So I sat and she sat in one corner, I sit in the other corner, and I kind of watch her and we'd talk back and forth, but mainly we were just quiet and we worked in the studio. And our goal was to make enough pots during the week to load a glaze on a Friday night and load and fire on Saturday all day. That was sort of our weekly routine. And I was an undergrad and she was in grad. And we started unloading the kilns, and we, at one point, like I couldn't recognize my pots from her pots, which made me feel really good because she made these really beautiful functional pots. And then that was sort of when I realized like, oh, like I really like, this is something I want to do for a long time. I don't know. And I didn't know, like I said, like what the path was necessarily. Like, was it teaching? Was it production potter, living in the woods somewhere? Like what did it look like? I just knew that it's something that I always wanted to be a part of my life.
Yeah. So it was kind of that, the fact that you were trying to produce a lot and you were just throwing pots over and over. It's that idea of mastery comes with 10,000 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to have the muscle memory. Like you have to, in order to make the work that I make today, which is a lot more manipulated and wonky and looser, depending on the pots. You have to know, you have, the foundation has to be there first. And building that strength and that foundation was always important to me. And teaching, when I taught, I would teach the students, like, you can alter later, but you have to know you have to have the tools first. So, basically my entire undergrad was sort of building my toolbox full of tools that I would need at some point later.
So what do you feel like your role now, your incredible dedication to this organization, like, I see it very much as a reflection of an art practice in a way.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about what from your own artistic practice you feel is what makes you be able to do this job well?
You have to show up every day, right? That's the first step. So just showing up, building your team, your community of people that you want to be around, surround yourself with.
Tools in your toolbox.
Tools in the toolbox. Yeah. And just, I feel like there's all these aspects of my life and background that I can apply to the work as the executive director. Going back from, what my parents taught me as a child, to what I learned yesterday, and you have to make mistakes and you have to learn, and, you have to be able to adapt. And I think as artists, we're very good problem solvers. So I think that also makes me a good executive director.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, you're a natural leader, but I wonder if there is a moment in your life when you had the same sense that you had when you knew you were a good potter. Do you feel like there was a moment when you were like, okay?
No.
No, I knew you were gonna say
I
that.
think I'm still striving to be a good potter and artist.
But no, a leader though. Like, do you think there was a moment when you had that same feeling of knowing that you were good at this, the leadership job?
No, I don't. I think people have a hard time making decisions, and going back to like different scenarios and different things, like I was always just trying to solve a problem. So in undergrad, the situation arose where they were going to remove all the credentials from the art department if we didn't do X, Y, and Z. So it was like, okay, well, let's go do X, Y, and Z. Like, and we had to pivot and fix things that were broken around the studio, and, build a community and a club and all these things. And then similarly, it happened in graduate school. It was like, I went to Georgia State, and if if you wanted to use something, it was broken, you had to learn how to fix it, you know, I wanted to learn how to fire atmospheric firing, there was no kiln, so I'm like, okay, well, what if I wrote a proposal for a class and I taught a class and me and the students could then build the kiln? So then I taught myself like how to build kilns and, you know, so I've just always been a little crazy enough to take the leap and, you know, it's a fine line between confidence and like, you know, driving off the road, I guess. I don't know. Like, I don't know. So somehow I've always been able to like just step up and say, okay, guys, we can do this. I've never thought of it as like me doing something. I've always thought of it as like we're doing something. And I guess that's what you're saying by leader. Like, I don't think of myself like in the front. I think of myself as in the middle or in the back, like pushing it down the road somehow. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree, especially when some of us are not as good at making decisions. Anyway, thank you. Let's talk about, let's bring some images up. Unless there was anything else you wanted to add.
no,
Okay. Excellent. Okay, can the Zoom folks see this, the image? Okay. Do you want to be your own slide advancer, or do you want me to do it?
I'll do it.
You can just press the button.
So I put together a lot of slides because I wasn't sure who was going to be here. So I'll go as quickly as possible.
Oh, you're good.
Jennifer mentioned this earlier. I'm from Georgia. I don't think I've lost all of my Southern accent yet at this point, but you know, I really grew up in smaller towns in Georgia, a couple of different places in Georgia, and spent a lot of time playing outside. And that was sort of my way of just having adventures. And I have a brother and a mother and father. And that was sort of our family in Georgia. I'm just gonna like fly through some sort of inspirational photos that I've taken. This doesn't, interesting enough, like texture doesn't really show up in my work, but I'm always really just drawn to like the natural textures and things that are happening in nature. And I think the ability to see all of the beauty around us is very important. And I think that gets overlooked constantly just in our day-to-day chaos. I like to explore. There was always a lot of abandoned buildings and sheds and barns in the South. So again, you'll sort of see some of this show up later in the work. It's, you know, there's some Southern homes and homes throughout the US that have these really tall monumental columns. Like I really can't relate to that. That's not what my house looked like, but I can definitely compare it to like the way I feel when I'm around these sort of massive trees. I think they have the same strength. And just sort of comparing that in my head, sort of this idea of like what is strength and what that looks like. And then, you know, old pieces of farm equipment were always around. And I feel like that sort of has shown up in the work over the years. It's like one of the spiral, I'm definitely in love with the wheel and the throwing process, but I think there's more to it than just that. You know, what do you see when you're walking around in nature? And, you know, there's things that I find that are funny. And I found this train in the middle of nowhere when I was exploring, and it says, do not hump on the side of it. And I'm just like, you know, I'm like, oh, this is hilarious. Like, am I the only one that thinks that's funny? And this like piece of wood beside it that looks like this crazy creature kind of with its eyebrows raised at me. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know what other people see when they see things, but like, I like to sort of capture what I'm looking at. You know, the fragility of clay. I found this old place where they made kilns and they made bricks. And this was literally on a cart that was just kind of stopped mid tracks. And it It'd probably been sitting there since the 70s, so it's just deteriorated away. And if I could capture that and remake it, I would love to, but I can capture it in a photograph. So. And then these are some plaster molds from an old lamp factory that I found in an old barn. And then sort of how they showed up later in a piece that I made, just kind of that quiet nature of just like what porcelain looks like when it's soda fired, there's nothing on it, you know, kind of sitting there by itself. This is my second soda kiln. This is my second soda kiln I ever built when I was in college. So, and these are some little T-bow forms that were coming out of that kiln. Basically, I have a few forms that I always explore. One is the sort of cup tumbler form, one is a bottle form. I'll show you a few others as we go, but I think the grouping of objects is important and how they relate to each other and sort of having a conversation with each other. So, you know, the image at the top left is my parents' house that they had in Tennessee, and sort of thinking about like the peering in of windows and how I can sort of lay out these cups in this grid form for you to really like pay attention to each one of them, but together they're a whole unit. This is a bottle form that showed the sort of a different iteration of a bottle form with some longer necks. These are life-size pieces that I made. So I guess the piece on the right is probably around 6'4", and then the piece on the left is a little over 5 feet, maybe. Stacked forms. These are based off of the actual body measurements of friends of mine at the time that were in the studio and actually let me measure their bodies. But really just thinking about how pots are vessels and containers, and we are also as individuals, sort of that containment, and what's inside or what's not inside. You know, these have lids, so they're closed up, so you don't get to see that. But I really think about our interactions with each other as people also, and how we treat each other on a daily basis, and how our body language says a lot more than our language. So it's always sort of that relationship of people and forms that I'm really drawn to. This is a platter on the, you know, right and left, top and bottom, and sort of how things that I've seen in nature remind me of what's happening on the surface of these platters. That's like moss on a tree trunk at the top, and that's a sort of a scar where a branch was on a tree at the bottom. This is another series of pieces that I did for an installation that was at a show. These are some square plates. These are actually the inside of a form. So the forms were thrown as these really large, wide cylinders, and then they're cut and they're laid open, because I feel like unless you're the user of a pot, you don't always get to see the inside. And sometimes the inside is way more beautiful than the outside. So it was really about me trying to expose the inside of these and create these trays. Again, just thinking about reflection and how, you know, you can simply stack something and it creates something else. I did have an opportunity to go do a residency at Anderson Ranch. I was living in Atlanta with my beautiful wife, Joanne, who's on this call. And she stayed and took care of the doggies and everything while I went away for 6 months, and had the opportunity to make work there. So I had a studio space and just tried to fill it up with as many pieces as I possibly could while I was there. Got to experience weather that I'd never experienced being from Georgia. You know, really just kind of dove into what I was seeing around me and seeing if that could show up in the work. There's some caves there, so I did some stalagmite type forms. These are actually come off the wall. Eventually they were mounted on the wall. Again, a cup form, but thinking about like the arrangement of it and what else you could create with that form. And then shortly after that, we moved to Philadelphia. So I have a whole new city to explore and all new inspirations to draw from. And when I showed up at the clay studio, I couldn't fire, I could only fire reduction. I couldn't fire soda, salt, wood, anything that I had been firing. So I dove into some Shino work. And then started putting some wood ash and red art on them to kind of juicing up the forms a little bit. So these are all gas fired, but they kind of look wood fired. These are some shelves I made, just again, thinking about like the base or the foundation of how you display the work. And then I feel like every functional pot has at least the side A and B, even though it's a three-dimensional form, but my work definitely has an A and B side. So usually the part with the thumb mark in it is the part that I'm gonna get to view, and the opposite side of the cup is the part that the viewer will get to view if I'm using the form. So thinking about like how I can change the surface on each of those sides is important. And then at some point, I gave up my studio at the clay studio and set up a studio at home. So it was important to try to figure out a new glaze. So I started working with this white glaze. So it's white, and then I have 4% copper added to it. So I have a green version of it as well. But I really was looking for a glaze that I could get sort of this movement and a lot of subtleties in the glaze with just one glaze. Because for me, it's not about the glaze, it's about the form. So these are some pictures that I made. And then these are some basket forms that I made that are just clay that are fired, vitrified all the way to the top. I think these are cone 6, I believe, but nothing else on them. So really, again, just focusing on the form. And letting the beauty of the clay, show off a little bit. And then I always want the bottoms to be considered. So this is the bottom of each of those forms. And then again, I revisit the same forms every few years, but this bottle form is a form that I have remade and remade and remade. So these on the bottom left are all sort of leaning towards the sun. These on the top are a lot more simplified and just wood fired. And then these are probably the two last pieces that I made before I took over as the executive director. So I was really trying to get complicated with forms, and I don't even know how many parts this is, but these were made in my studio. I didn't even show these, I don't think.
Yeah, we had them in the gallery.
Oh, did somebody? Yeah, okay. I think, yeah.
We put them in that when we had the living room.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
When the
Okay.
walls were red.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So they're fun. I mean, I don't know that they're perfect, but they're fun. And then I took over as the executive director. So I thought I'd throw this slide in there. Talking about life challenges and what's next. $13.5 million was what was next for myself and the clay studio. So that's where all my focus went. Starting in March of 2018, we had a campaign to raise money and we had a building to get built. So construction took up a lot of my time. And it was really about just trying to balance work-life balance. So I intentionally shut down my studio. I did manage to make some clay letters for the front of the building, which is up on the sign out front. And we managed to get it all done. So that was what, April of 21. So then 22. So then I had the opportunity to back to the studio. So the work that we're talk about next, I guess, is the work that I made in February as the visiting artist. So I was really excited to use the space. So,
At those last two that you showed, the black and white ones, I remember you talking about, you wanted them to be really complicated. You were
yeah.
just trying to do something different that you'd never done
Yeah.
before, and really, they were amazing and great and big. I mean, they're like,
Yeah, they were probably
20 or
36. Yeah, they were pretty big.
yeah, they were really tall. And you brought them in when we all were like, whoa.
Yeah.
And you talked about earlier the fact that you really felt like you had to put your practice aside. You know, I think a lot of people try to keep going, and that there would be this idea that if you were throwing in the basement on the weekends, it would somehow be relaxing. And we talk about how ceramics is so beneficial therapeutically. We're talking a lot about that right now, but that wasn't what was going to be for you. So can you talk a little bit about like why that wasn't going to be relaxing for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd started doing some shows, like I did the Baltimore show, the PMA craft show, like that was like 18, right? End of 18. I did have a good studio practice going. My studio is in the basement of our home. But yeah, when I got the phone call, about the executive director position in March of 2018, I sat down, Joanne and I had a long talk, and she actually encouraged me to take the position. She said, no, now's your time. You're next. This is what you need to be doing. And, we talked about how much our lives would change, and, we knew the obstacles and the challenges and the excitement and everything that was ahead, but neither one of us were fooling ourselves that it was going to be this easy road. So I said, okay, I can't be pulled in like, a lot of different directions. Like, I have responsibilities as a wife and a partner with my family. I have a responsibility to the clay studio, so something's at some point's got to be put on the back burner. So at that point I said, okay, studio will be there. I can come back to it. I'm going to intentionally shut my studio down because I didn't want to feel torn or feel like I was being pulled in different directions. And I didn't want to regret my decision to take on the challenge of being the executive director. So that was sort of the decision that was made. So
I remember you talking about that, and I thought it was really smart and brave, another sort of brave way to be in your creative life, because you didn't want the artwork to become something negative.
right.
You didn't want it to feel bad.
Yeah.
So you just took it out and knew you would put it back in again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Which I think is
And
really
it'll
great.
be there. I mean, there's things that, come and go in our lives, and you can only take your energy and spread it so thin. And I'm really good at putting a lot of energy out, but I'm learning to like figure out that I can't put it everywhere. So that was, it was a smart decision.
It's another good leadership thing to realize that. And then that also helps those around you understand, which is important. I will add that at that moment, you decided it would be a good idea to get a puppy.
Yeah. Well, someone's got to keep Joy in company when I'm not at home. So that was a good trade-off.
Josie and I were like, wait, did she just say they're getting a puppy? Okay.
I forgot about that. So,
yeah. Good. Okay. So then we decide, and of course we thought this was going to happen in like October. I think that you would be the guest artist, and again, you just were like, it's okay, we're just gonna put it off a little bit. And then it happened was it January or February? I can't even remember.
I think it was February.
And you had some really specific things that you wanted to experiment with, but I know that you also just wanted to not really, you kept saying,
Oh,
I don't have a plan. And then she'd like go secretly and like write a little
I was
down.
gonna say, I have a notebook about this thick with what I wanted to do, but the reality, the time will fly by and I still had responsibilities. But I think what I really wanted to do, I wanted to be able to experience the space, first of all, like,
Mhm.
this beautiful building and kilns and people and the community. Like I wanted to have that experience. So that was number one. I also wanted to help launch, the soda kiln and get it up and running, which I would not have been able to do without the studio techs, and Duke has been very graciously helping with that. So thank you, Duke. And then I just wanted to try to remember what it felt like to like work in clay. So I always warm up with the cup form, sort of the handleless cup form. And that's sort of my muscle memory, like, okay, you can do this, like shut all those voices off. You remember how to do this, like nobody's judging you, all the things that are running through your head when you walk into the studio. So I made those forms, and then I knew I wanted to make some mugs. So I got those out of the way, and then I was like, okay, I have 5 or 6 forms that I like to make, bottles, vases, you've seen them today. But like how can I make those forms differently? So in order to really make something feel different that you're making with your own hands, right? You have to pick up a different tool. So like I intentionally like tried to put down my other tools, and then what is the new tool that I could pick up and experiment with? And in this case, it was material. It was aggregate. And I sort of had it, in my list of things that I wanted to play with for a while. So I said, okay, well, what happens if I wedge this aggregate and this material into this beautiful porcelain, material? And then I just started throwing it and playing. So that's where these base forms come from.
What is aggregate?
So there's anything that's coarse, like grog, there's rock, there's grog, there's vermiculite, there's what else did I use? Chicken grit, which is granite, basically ground up granite, crushed granite.
What are those two?
The one on the left is rock, like feldspar rock. The one on the right is vermiculite.
And
So-
is that something that's then often used in glaze vermiculite?
Yeah, you can definitely, you can use them, you can find them in different, usually powder form, in the glaze lab, but, vermiculite, they used to put in the old cone boxes, to float the cones. And it's used in agriculture, potting soil to take up space, right? Yeah, to aerate. So it's just
that's why it sounds
taking up,
familiar.
it's
Okay.
just taking up volume in the clay.
It's interesting though, that when it got that hot, that it didn't just make holes in the clay.
It doesn't burn away.
It actually has its own personality.
It's actually this gold flaky fleck sort of look to it.
It's the white stuff that's in the potting soil?
No, that's actually I don't know that they actually, I think they banned vermiculite now, and they
They did.
use, yeah, I think they banned vermiculite because it's hard to get, and they use,
Is that styrofoam ball?
That's
It just
styrofoam,
Seems
yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
I think there's something called Petra.
Yeah, like a different version.
But it's in-
Yeah.
That I used to start. But the vermiculite had, I think what they were saying is it had some kind of like asbestos. So
Probably,
maybe that's asbestos.
probably,
Oh, no.
That's what they were saying. One of the reasons why they took music and then
probably, yeah.
What was the weirdest thing you mixed in?
Fruity Pebbles, yeah.
I was
Because
gonna say Fruit Loops and I was like, no, it's not.
it was
Fruit
Fruity
Loops.
Pebbles, and it's actually Joanne's fault because we got an Amazon grocery order, and this is where I know, like, she never pays attention to me, but like this, she was paying attention, and so she
never
she
pays
says
attention.
she says I was like, we didn't order that cereal. And she goes, no, but don't you potters like wedge stuff in your clay? Like you should just put this in the basement and keep it. And I was like, yes, like I've trained her well over the years. So yeah, so I kept it.
It was
And
a,
and it smelled horrible because it rotted in the clay. It was bad, it was bad. Yeah, it didn't turn out
It's
well,
not
but yeah,
it was a collaborative piece.
it was a
then.
collaborative piece.
And
but-
that axe probably did burn out in the fire.
It,
like,
that did,
very
and that's,
early on in the
that's in
fire.
one of the vases too.
Is it the one on the left?
Yeah, it's the
Is it
one on the
rough
far left.
Is it rough on the hands?
Oh, yeah, it's
I was like,
horrible in your hands. Yeah, the one piece I thought I was gonna die throwing it. The piece on the far right, that's literally
Yeah,
just
the
like
rocks.
rocks. I was like, I was like, oh, yeah.
When I saw those, I was like, she must have put that on later. She couldn't have possibly thrown.
No,
it. You had like, were your hands bleeding?
Yeah, maybe, the things you'll do for clay, but.
Nodding again.
Yeah,
Joanne's nodding
yeah,
again.
so, but, yeah, so these are really about like. I mean, like, if you take it back to like, think about like what I've been doing for like past 3-4 years, 5, I don't know, I lose track of time, but since March of 2018, like it's been labor, it's been construction, it's just been grinding it out. So like, sort of that metaphor for these chunky, pieces of earth, that I'm now putting back into this pure porcelain that's all smooth and creamy and is, honored in a lot of pottery traditions, it just felt right. So there's sort of that side of it. And then there's also just, I wanted the forms to be quiet, I guess. So I just didn't glaze these at all. And these went into the soda kiln. So then the soda actually just creates a natural glaze on the surface. So they're as quiet as I can be right now, I guess. Yeah,
This one's Fruity Pebbles. Now I think you should do Fruit Loops. That came
that
out.
one's malachite grog, like really chunky malachite grog. So that's actually a white grog. But you can't get it that coarse. It's usually ground up. It's like malachite grog's in 182 clay body, but you won't ever feel it because it's not that chunky.
So where'd you get this if it wasn't?
Oh, it's stuff I had laying around in my studio.
Oh.
Like, oh, I'll use that one day
Okay.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
And then this one, it's so expressive that you just grabbed it or something.
It's my fist. Actually.
Oh, it's your.
Yeah.
Like a punch.
Yeah.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Who's the punch for, Jennifer?
Just,
The punch list.
it just, yeah, exactly. Who knows what was going on in my head? Probably. We probably got a call about the punch list that day.
All right, let's go back and you can talk about these.
Oh, so these are sort of yeah, I mean, these are probably definitely closer to the forms that I was making before. But I wanted to, there's a clay that I used in undergrad in the soda kiln that they're still making, so I wanted to try that in our soda kiln. And it does not look the same. They've definitely changed the recipe, but that's okay. I like the firefly, what is it called?
Fireflies, or wait, now yeah, firefly spots.
Firefly spots that are happening.
Gohonde
Yeah.
in Korean.
Yeah,
So is the color in the seams or the cracks or whatever they are, is that from the soda or is that something that you applied that reacted with the soda?
I didn't apply anything. So that's the blushing. So the soda is caught up in the atmosphere of the flame, and depending on how and where it hits the pot, it creates those marks, which sort of my pots lend itself to that already. So you don't really have to do anything, put it in the kiln.
And then this is the other, so that's the front and the side view, and this is the second one, front and side, or I don't know. Side and 3/4. And then, of course, we haven't said out loud that today is also the opening of an exhibition of Jennifer's work, which will be on view in the featured artist area of the shop. And probably now, if not, certainly within the next hour or so, these will all be available for purchase on the website. So there are, I think, 9 cups and 9 mugs, and then all the vases. So, yeah, talk about how you construct a mug and why is it? What do
This
you make
is
them
sort
like
of the same mug form that I revisit and same cup form that I revisit. But I think because my time, the thought was that my time down there would be sort of this reintroduction to what I love to do, which is make these pots. It was important for them to be kind of quiet. It was supposed to be quiet time for me to really reflect. And so I just thought, well, why not have this beautiful Celadon traditional glaze on the piece, which is also, just a really quiet glaze. So, and just to kind of highlight the form. So that was sort of definitely intentional as well. So the cups and the mugs are the Celadon glaze, and then the vases are just white. Oh,
How, all right, actually, I feel like we're at the point where we can have people ask questions. I don't know. I want you to talk a little bit about how you do the handle construction.
sure, yeah. So they're thrown like this is 1.25 pounds of clay. You want to get exact here. So 1.25 pounds of clay thrown into a what's this, like a cooling tower form? What's this called? This form?
Concave,
Yeah,
concave cylinder.
concave cylinder.
I don't
Okay.
know, is that right?
Thrown into a concave cylinder, manipulated directly on the wheel with a really deep undercut at the base, and then with a thumb mark as well. So then you can see the thumb mark on the bottom right pushing in from the inside. So for the mugs, the handle goes over the thumb mark. So it looks like that handle is going to be too small, but what it does was when you hold the handle, it gives your fingers a lot more space in there. So I would say if you're down there, pick up the mugs. Some are 2-fingered, some are 3-fingered, 1 finger. And just feel how it feels in your hand and the weight of it. And hopefully you'll find one that you like, that you enjoy holding. And then for the cups, sort of the opposite happens. So those are thrown convex, I guess,
Mhm.
cylinder form. And these are trimmed afterwards, but they're altered directly on the wheel with the thumb mark, which is what you're seeing there, sort of this, I think of that as the front side, so it's like the belly button of the pot. So then when you're holding it, your thumb sort of goes into that groove. So then that is my view of the pot, and then the person who's on the opposite side of me gets to see the other view of the pot. So these don't, they always have a side A and B because of the thumb mark, but surface wise, I didn't play with sort of this A-B side because they're just so quiet with the Celadon glaze.
When you're talking about the thumb mark and your view and the viewer's view, I was thinking about these 3 things that we've been talking about as we're working on a future project. To make ceramic art, make with it, use it, and view it, and you've encapsulated all that in your explanation of your cup. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's have people ask questions or make comments or whatever. So if you are on Zoom, feel free to take yourself off mute and ask a question or put it in the chat. Kevin says, "The things you'll do for clay." It's an excellent quote. I agree. Who has a question?
I was wondering, like, because you're like in the building in like different capacity, how did like working as an executive director, like influence how you like maneuver your guest experience of like an artist, and then how did that later on translate into like, because then you understand like how like that guest experience as like, or the artist experience as the executive director, how did those like?
I think my job,
Wait, I'm going to repeat the question. How did being a guest artist interplay with your understanding of being an executive director and vice versa. Otherwise, people on Zoom couldn't hear.
My job, right? I feel like one of my many jobs as the executive director is for everyone else to have this amazing experience when they walk through the door. So from day one of building this building, we had conversations around what is welcoming and how people will feel and, how they're welcomed and greeted and, from basically the sidewalk, in and back out. So I am very much aware of that. So I knew that I had a role as the executive director that was being a visiting artist, but I also knew that as a visiting artist, I wanted to make sure I also played my part, which is, interacting with other artists, studio members and students and people in the building. So I think I'm always self-aware. But I know for a fact, my previous jobs as a student, as a teacher, as a studio tech, when I first started here at the Clay Studio, is really what informed all of it the most. Because I knew the organization on a very intimate level, from the ground up. And that also played a lot into building the building. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
No, it definitely does. I guess I was kind of thinking because then when you're working as a guest artist, you get excited about when the soda fire comes out. And
Yeah.
you're gonna because I feel like you encourage one of us they should try out the gas fire.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and so I get how that is that excited was curious and when you're oh yeah, I can't wait to get to see that with your mom.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, and I didn't go away to do a residency, which is also different, right? So you're constantly sort of turning on and off, okay, I have a few minutes to work in the studio, but I still have to go to this meeting. So really trying to compartmentalize all these things is definitely, it's a skill. That you kind of have to have when you're wearing a lot of hats. So, yeah.
I didn't know that you stopped doing any class when the building started. But I just wanted to say thank you for that sacrifice,
You're welcome.
because this is such an incredible opportunity. I feel that. And, I just really appreciate that. And I could see how what you were saying with all the, the messy construction that you were leaving with some of that texture into your
Yeah.
stuff that you were just doing again here. And I think that's very cool. I just love.
Thank you.
I can say that when you were doing the residency, my respect for your privacy was extreme. I thought she's working, she's walking, just talk. She's walking.
You guys were quiet, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was so happy that you were there working, and I thought, God, that's so weird, to getting back to this part of your brain and your body and your soul.
Yeah. I was happy to be doing it. But yeah, it's definitely, it takes a minute to sort of
And it took a minute not to say, well, how did you do that? That's not even matter, it's not your business, somebody else is working.
You could ask anything you want.
You said that, but I
Maybe you need to do it once a year.
Yeah.
Interesting to if we found that working in an executive way, business, actually positively affected your work in any way. Do you feel that was a sort of inspiration, having to build the whole thing, the nuts and bolts of it together?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much that I've learned from being the executive director that I've used in my personal life as well, right? Especially when it comes to budgets and things like that I'm responsible for. You know, I pay way more attention to my personal finances now that I've been the executive director. I'm like, oh, I should do this for myself as well. So yeah, that has definitely been great, but, I have 29 amazing staff members that I get to work with every day. And that team of people are constantly inspiring me, and we show up and we work towards this common goal. And, you know, that sort of confidence and, watching them, you know, with their own struggles and fears and challenges. It is helpful for me to see that, because then it's like, it's okay that I have that same thought process or feeling, you know, when I go into the studio.
It's not entirely united.
Yeah. Yeah, so, but it's been good.
Good question.
Yeah.
Curious about the slide that was like, you're, it was like, if you're waiting to speak, you're not really.
Yep,
Speaking.
it's not my quote, it's someone else's quote, but I heard it one day and I thought, yes, they're absolutely right, because I think especially in the group settings, right, like, if you're thinking about what you're going to say next and you're ready, you're waiting to speak, you're not really listening to what the person is talking about in the moment. So because I'm usually thinking about like the next 3 steps ahead, right? Because I'm problem solving, and that's what we do as artists, we problem solve. And we're trying to like predict what's gonna happen next, and that's a skill that you have to have. Sometimes you have to stop and just wait and listen, and then think or speak about what's next. So,
Very true and good. Patrick Bell says, I'm curious to hear how you think about the body in relation to some of the more recent work. If I know you mentioned the body as a vessel in some earlier work, and of course, many of your works have very direct record of your hand or fist impressed on their surface, but a lot of them seem to relate to the body in a figurative way. Do you think this is a happy accident, an ironic side effect of making such direct marks with your body? Or is there some idea of the body as a whole that comes into the making of making your work?
it's very intentional. I think of every vase that I make as a figurative, inspired by the figure, whether it's in motion, not in motion, whether it has imperfections or perfections. It's all intentional.
There's particularly one of the new ones that has shoulders.
Yep.
But it almost looks like a design for a dress.
There you go.
The helix underpins a lot of your work, doesn't it? The helical shape, which I
Mhm.
was quite interested in. Yeah, because it reminded me of oryx horns, you know, the way the oryx horn has that.
Oh, the animal.
Helical kind of shape and forms. And I just wondered, is that something that's in the depths of your mind? Or something?
It definitely could be in the subconscious
Yeah.
for sure. I think trying to like the centrifugal force of the wheel and having that sort of spiral, it's easy to highlight it. And I think trying to then break up that rhythm with a different mark
Hmm.
or something is like where you take like as a beginner, like a beginner making pots, like that's sort of an easy mark to understand. And then the challenge is like, how do you push that mark a little farther to break away from like that exact symmetry?
Yeah, yeah.
So like, that's sort of what I'm always playing with, like the asymmetry and how can I alter it directly on the wheel and then even after the wheel, like every one of those vases was altered a second time off the wheel. None of them are round.
Yeah, I
Um,
noticed that.
yeah, and then
It's exquisite. by the way.
there, thank you, and then there's like 4 or 5 parts to the 2 that are soda fire, the
Yeah.
bigger ones. So, and you don't need to see it right away, but it's there. And then I would say the 2 soda fired ones that are downstairs, we can pick them up, but on the bottoms, they actually have their own sort of foot
Mhm.
that you couldn't trim on a wheel, so instead I made like a thrown plate and turned it into a foot.
Mm.
So again, like thinking about like the base and going back to the figure, like we all have a foundation that we came from as individuals and people, and we carry that foundation with us.
Mhm.
And that foundation is important to me. So like every part has to be considered.
Mhm.
Like sometimes the foundation's a little wobbly, sometimes, you know, it's not. So, yeah.
Great question. Anyone else? Janet said, I like to think of artists as detectives in that we are good observers as are good executives. That is very true. Well, as I said, Jennifer's show opens today and it is second Thursday gallery night. So if you are here now and you want to stay, or if you're at home and you feel like coming in your car with the windows rolled up, we'll have some really nice presentation downstairs. You can see the work and pick it up. We're also having a hands-on event tonight. You can make yourself an identity flag tile. That will be indoors as well. And then we are planning on Clay Fest on Saturday. So those are some of the events coming up. And then because we love to do a lot of different things, we just added Thursday, June 29th. We're going to have the premiere of the film that's been made for the Gone and Forever exhibition, which is downstairs. So that'll sort of be a special evening time, Clay and conversation. So mark your calendar for that day as well. And of course, if you would like to make a donation to the Clay Studio, go on our website.
Good.
I always forget to do that.
Good job.
This is free programming made possible by all of our hard work and grants.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for the opportunity to be on your Clay and Conversations. Thank you all for being here today and on Zoom. And I love you and appreciate you all. So thank you.
Well, thank you. We had some nice thank yous for you in the chat, and I'll just end by again saying that I feel very, oh, hi Dominique.
Dominique, yes is the answer to your question.
Hi Dominique. I feel really lucky to work with you, for you, but you always say with, and it's a really special experience to work with someone who is a great leader and appreciates the skills of the people around her and also knows how to help them do their best. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go before I start crying.
Me too.